them have sent their proposed amendments so that we will not go back and forth in our virtual hearings or session. They have sent their proposed amendments already. So if there will be no objection from the floor, I will be reading their proposed amendments, all those who submitted their proposed amendments, and then later on, if there is still one or two amendments that you would like to do afterwards, if I did not cover all the proposed amendments, then we can do that, if you don't mind. So, Mr. President, may I be allowed to start with the proposed amendments of our colleagues, and then I will, of course, declare if the sponsor, yours truly, will accept the amendment.
There an objection? Hearing none, the motion with Senate President is approved. Please proceed.
Thank you. May I start with on page 14? Most of these are all right. On page 14, the first line, add the Roman numeral 1 to Article 7 to make it Article 8. This is the First Amendment, and this will be from Senator Bong Revilla. I accept, Mr. President.
An objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 80, under the recommendations of PhilHealth, second to the last bullet point after the word admissions, add a comma, and then subject to the submission of full documentation requirements and after the conduct of the necessary vetting processes to ensure that no fraudulent claims will be paid. I accept, Mr. President.
An objection? Approved.
Again, still from Senator Ramon Bong Revilla, add under PhilHealth, for PhilHealth to immediately report on an accurate, truthful, realistic, and database analysis and determination of the actuarial life of the corporation to enable it to judiciously allocate its funds and, if necessary, to allow the government to effectively intervene towards the desired plan for the corporation. I accept, Mr. President.
An objection? Approved.
And then to continue, again, add recommendation under various Senate committees for the appropriate Senate committee to revisit the Universal Health Care Law and the National Health Insurance Act as amended with the end view of clarifying the nature and scope of payment mechanisms which may be implemented by the PhilHealth. I accept, Mr. President.
An objection? Approved.
Thank you. Mr. President, moving on to the amendments of Senator Sally Angara. From Senator Angara, add recommendation under DOJ. These are all under the recommendations portion of the committee report, Mr. President. Under DOJ, for the Department of Justice to look into granting immunity to witnesses who will be testifying against erring, corrupt PhilHealth officials, provided that they comply with the conditions under Republic Act number 6981 or the Witness Protection, Security, and Benefit Act. Also, in ascertaining whether the witnesses do not appear to be the most guilty, for the DOJ to consider if such witnesses may have been forced by corrupt officials to commit any fraudulent or illegal acts under the circumstances. I accept, Mr. President.
An objection? Approved.
Continue, add recommendation under PhilHealth. For PhilHealth to issue a certification under oath that a thorough review of the medical claims was done and that the actual reimbursement paid to the healthcare institutions / healthcare providers are true and correct, period. This document should also form part of the PhilHealth's submission to the Commission on Audit, open and close parentheses, COA. I accept, Mr. President.
An objection? Approved.
To continue with Senator Angara's amendments, add a new section under recommendations for the Congress, and under which are the following recommendations. for Congress to amend Section 18 of Republic Act number 11223 or the Universal Healthcare Act to add in a specific provision which mandates accredited healthcare institutions, open and close parenthesis, HCIS, slash healthcare providers, open and close parenthesis, HCPS, to execute a sworn undertaking that the medical claims submitted to PhilHealth and for reimbursement are certified true and correct. For another paragraph, for Congress to pass a measure strengthening the country's existing whistleblower program. I accept, Mr. President.
In objection? Approved.
Thank you. Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the sponsor.
Yes, thank you, Senator Angara. We appreciate that. Now, from the minority leader, Senator Franklin Rilon, he is proposing add recommendations under the DOJ/Ombudsman, still in the recommendations portion of the Committee of the Whole report, to conduct a thorough and swift investigation on the diversion and malversation of PhilHealth funds through fraudulent schemes, including probable collusion between PhilHealth officials/employees and private individuals, period. The benefits of the Witness Protection, Security and Benefit Act, Republic Act number 6981, shall be made available and extended to qualified witnesses in order to ensure their full cooperation and safeguard them from threat, intimidation, or reprisal. And to continue, to investigate and file appropriate charges against all those involved in the overpricing of the COVID-19 testing kits, period. I accept, Mr. President.
In objection? Approved.
Moving to page 85, recommendations under the GCG. After the sentence, the Governance Commission for GOCCs as governing body for government corporations must actively and decisively perform its mandate as a central advisory. And then Senator Drilon wants to insert the sentence, it must ensure that PhilHealth shall function and operate as an accountable, government-owned and controlled corporation within the corporate governance standards and principles of Republic Act 10149. I accept, Mr. President.
In objection? Approved.
Still on the recommendations under GCG, add the following recommendations. Review and implement the limits on compensation per dime allowances and incentives of the members of the Board of Directors of PhilHealth as provided under Section 23 of Republic Act 10149. Formulate and implement a reorganization plan in accordance with its power under Section 5 of the Republic Act number 10149. Under Section 5 of the GCG law, a reorganization may be done by GCG on its own and does not need the approval of the President to implement the same. The law states that upon determination by the GCG that it is to the best interest of the state that a GOCC should be reorganized, it shall implement the reorganization unless otherwise directed by the President. Mr. President, may I ask the minority leader if, just to clarify, when you say President here, you mean the President of the Philippines?
That's correct, sir. The President of the Republic of the Philippines, that's under the law.
All right. So I accept, Mr. President.
In objection? Approved.
And then additional from Senator Drilon, add another recommendation under various Senate committees. For the Joint Congressional Oversight Committee on Universal Healthcare to promptly and regularly conduct a review of the implementation of Republic Act number 11223, particularly on the compliance with the competency requirements for the appointment of the President and members of the Board of Directors as provided under Section 13 and 14 of RA number 11223. I accept, Mr. President.
In objection? Approved.
Thank you. In the body of the committee report, Mr. President, page 29, still Still with the minority leader. Insert a new section after the discussion on IRM. He proposes Roman numeral number 2, overpriced SARS-CoV-2 testing package. It says, the committee also takes notice that when it convened on 20 May 2020 to discuss updates on COVID-19 situation in the country, there were testimonies and documents which showed that PhilHealth's SARS-CoV-2 testing package was overpriced. On 8 April 2020, Mr. Morales signed PhilHealth Circular number 2020-0010, which provided for the benefits package for testing for SARS-CoV-2 as follows. There is a presentation on the board, Mr. President. The packages for SARS-CoV testing, package code, description, package amount, it is all there. C190T1, all services for the testings are procured and provided by the testing laboratory, 8,150. C190T2, test kits are donated to the testing laboratory, 5,450. C190T3, test kits are donated to the testing laboratory, semicolon. Cost of running the laboratory and the RT-PCR machine for testing is included in the facility budget, 2,710. What was alarming about this was that PhilHealth entered into a memorandum of agreement with the Philippine Red Cross for the conduct of testing for the amount of 3,500 pesos, or in words and figures, per one of COVID-19 tests. Test, singular. When asked by Minority Leader Franklin Drilon about the suspiciously exorbitant PhilHealth testing package, Mr. Morales categorically admitted that they overestimated. And the Minority Leader wants this incorporated into the committee report. Senator Drilon, so if PhilHealth agreed with Philippine Red Cross that the cost per test is 3,500 and Red Cross agreed to this, it means that the cost is much, much lower than the 8,150 that you have attributed to the package. It doesn't require rocket science. Compare 8,150 with what Red Cross agreed at 3,500, and there immediately you can see the difference and the overcosting of PhilHealth, which is inimical to the government because you could have paid less. If you're only paying PRC or Philippine Red Cross of the 3,500, I could not understand how you could have fixed the COVID testing package at 8,150. Mr. Morales, that's correct ho, Senator. Mataas yung estimate namin. Continue with the proposal of Senator Drilon in the body. Indeed, if COVID-19 tests could be done by Red Cross for as low as 3,500, there is then no justification for the higher rates set by PhilHealth. Following the discovery of the overpricing and uproar it caused, PhilHealth revised its SARS-CoV-2 testing package in 22 June 2020 by issuing circular number 2020-0017 to wit, colon. Again, on the board, Mr. President, packages for SARS-CoV-2 testing for RT-PCR, the same three package code that I mentioned earlier, but this time one is 3,409, two is 2,077, and three is 901. Senator Drilon raised the issue anew during the committee's hearing on 4 August 2020. Continue with the proposed amendment. Senator Drilon, okay, so I go back to my previous question. Initially, the COVID test package was indicated at 8,150. When I started raising the issue of overpricing this test package, you came out with 3,409 per my records. In other words, you were able to reduce this. And if we do not create noise here, if we did not call your attention on the basis of 2 million projected tests that will be done, That's roughly 9 billion in funds of PhilHealth which would have been wasted. But having said that, may we know if there were hospitals who availed of the interim reimbursement mechanism using the old rate of 1,150? Mr. Morales, 8,150. Mr. Pargas, Mr. President, Senator De Leon, so far, for dashboard record as of July 31, for the 8,150 package, there were around 2,181 claims which are already paid. Senator De Leon, 2,389 claims. Mr. Pargas, this is Senator De Leon talking. Mr. Pargas, 2,181 claims. Senator De Leon, 81 claims. Mr. Pargas, for testing po. De Leon, okay. Mr. Pargas, that is divided to, for the 8,150, paid cases are 40. For those 5,450 wherein the test kits are actually donated to the laboratory, it is 2,075. And for those that the kits are actually donated, including the cost of the running of the laboratories, are actually included in the facility budget, 66 claims. So that this is in total of 2,181. But for the 8,150, 40 claims. Mr. Morales, may I explain, Senator Rilon, regarding that? Senator Rilon, before that, how did you arrive at 8,150? As far as I know, the true cost, if you look at it from the start, would not have gone anywhere near that amount. And in fact, that's validated by the fact that you were able to reduce it to 3,409. So the first question, sir, sorry, before anything, how did you arrive at 8,150 when in the case of Red Cross agreed to 3,500? Isn't this an indication of the true cost? Will already some margin of this COVID test package? Mr. Pargas, Mr. President, Senator Dillon, for the testing packages, especially the first one, the 8,150, we were able to get the initial cost estimates generated on the week of March 16 and was finalized on March 20. During then, there were only few testing kits and also there were only several accredited laboratories or licensed laboratories to do that. Now, the package includes not only the testing kits, but rather it also includes the clinical assessment, the clinical diagnosis, then that time, the specimen collection, including the specimen transport, because the laboratories and the swabbing can be done outside the laboratory, but has to be transported to the accredited laboratory, and of course, the PCR testing kit. Senator Dillon, okay, I will not waste my time of the committee, but I am prepared to submit to the committee the true cost. To start with, the Sunsure, which is the supplier of this, can do the test kits at something like $15. And then you have laboratory costs, etc., etc., etc. Your 8,150 is out of this world. And this is why when we started to question this, there was no dispute. You did not dispute it, and you immediately lowered it to 3,400. While the PhilHealth has since adjusted the rate, its responsible officers are not free from liability for their incompetence and for entering into transactions that are manifestly and grossly disadvantageous to the government. Were it not for the timely intervention of the Senate, the government would have lost at least 9 billion pesos computed based on the difference between 8,150 and the Philippine Red Cross 3,500 package multiplied by the targeted 2 million tests. I accept, Mr. President, those are the amendments of Senator Dillon.
Any objection? Approved.
Now, moving to the amendments of Senator Joel Villanueva, Mr. President. He would want a new section under recommendations for the Department of Information and Communications Technology, DICT, and under which add this recommendation. DICT must clarify through appropriate issuances the process which agencies must follow in amending their previously Approved Information System Strategic Plan, ISSP, in open and close parentheses. More particularly, it should allow, if possible and practicable, and subject to consultation with various stakeholders, the processing or review of amendments to an agency's previously approved ISSP even prior to the approval of their corporate operating budget, COB, in open and close parentheses. This way, board meetings and resolutions approving budgets for its equipment and for IT equipment, and services are guided by the ISSP prior to any budget approval and or release of budget for procurement. I accept, Mr. President, from Senator Villanueva.
Any objection? Approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Congrats to Lakers.
Thank you, Thank you, Senator Villanueva. That keeps me going. From Senator Ping Lacson. He would have proposed it, but he is presiding, so I will read it. So include in the recommendations under section the number of cases violation of Article 217 of Act Number 3815, otherwise known as the Revised Penal Code as amended, that should be filed against the erring PhilHealth officials, particularly the group of Secretary Francisco Duque III, Brigadier General Ricardo Morales, Mr. Renato Limsiaco Jr., Mr. Israel Pargas, and all other PhilHealth officials and employees who connived with and participated in the consummation of the punishable/illegal act, period. To be specific, comma, add in the third column of the table under penalties, at least, in open and close quotations, at least 631 counts of malversation of public funds or property. Number 1, the penalty of prisión correccional in its medium and maximum periods, if the amount involved in the misappropriation or malversation does not exceed 40,000 pesos. Number 2, the penalty of prisión mayor in its minimum and medium periods, if the amount involved is more than 40,000 pesos but does not exceed 1,200,000 pesos. Number 3, the penalty of prisión mayor in its maximum period de reclusión temporal and its minimum period, if the amount involved is more than 1,200,000 pesos but does not exceed 2,400,000 pesos. Number 4, the penalty of reclusión temporal in its medium and maximum periods, if the amount involved is more than 2,400,000 pesos but does not exceed 4,400,000 pesos. I accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
Again, to continue with the Lacson amendments, add under recommendation under DOJ Ombudsman to have a thorough review of the biddings and procurement contracts worth millions of pesos and look into the allegations relating to recurring winning bidders and possible collusion. I accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
To continue, add a new section under recommendations for DOH Secretary Francisco Duque III, and under which is this recommendation: to heed the call of the 14 senators who signed Senate Resolution number 362, recommending the resignation of the Secretary of Duque for his failure of leadership, negligence, lack of foresight, inefficiency in the performance of his mandate, resulting in poor planning, delayed response, lack of transparency, and misguided policies and in addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, evidence of conflict of interest, and perceived tolerance in the massive corruption in PhilHealth under his chairmanship, leaves him with no decent option but to resign. Period. The public has suffered enough and can no longer wait for the Secretary of Health's soul-searching endeavor.
An objection?
Mr. President, before I accept,
Sorry.
let me let me place on record, because I keep on hearing Secretary Duque in the media and the pronouncement saying that he does not have anything to do with it and he was not aware. Something to that effect. Mr. President, we find it really, as we look into the records, Secretary Duque is liable for the unlawful and illegal release of IRM funds because in the board of directors, in both the old law and the Republic Act number 7875, the National Health Insurance Act of 1995, under the board of directors, the composition of the corporation, if you will look at it, it says the corporation shall be governed by a board of directors. When we all know what we mean by govern. Ano? Now, hereinafter referred to as the board, composed of 11 members as follows. Number 1, the Secretary of Health, period. Number 2, the Secretary of Labor and Employment or his representative. Next, the Secretary of DILG or his representative. Secretary of DSWD or his representative. President of the corporations, President of Labor, etc., etc. Mr. President, it is very clear in the law. Siya lang, yung Secretary of Health, ang hindi pwedeng his representative or his representative. Siya talaga. So hindi pwedeng, di ba, na andun yung representative or something to that effect. So with that, Mr. President, I accept the amendment of Senator Lacson.
An objection? Approved.
To continue, Mr. President, still with the recommendations of, again, from Senator Lacson. For PhilHealth, to add the following. Among the proposals to allow expeditious and efficacious conduct of the COA audit are as follows. A, access to PhilHealth fraud investigation reports, which are only accessible to the office of the PhilHealth President and Chief Executive Officer and the anti-fraud units of the corporation. Semicolon. B, access to an offline clone of the entire PhilHealth database for COA to conduct some procedures outside PhilHealth network and office premises, such as in the performance of cross-agency data analytics, open and close parentheses, i.e. data comparison from PSA records, to produce more relevant audit information, semicolon, and, comma, letter C, deputization to conduct investigations of HCIS and HCPS, considering that presently, private institutions are not within the ambit of COA's audit. Period. I accept, Mr. President.
Before we act on the motion, I'd like to just place into the records that the proposals mentioned by the Senate President are not originally mine. They are contained in the 21 June 2019 letter of COA Commissioner Pabia to Secretary Duque himself as the chairperson of PhilHealth Board of Directors. The recommendations serve as concessions to be made with PhilHealth to aid in the expeditious and efficacious conduct of COA's audit to curb fraud and improve the existing systems and processes, to which Secretary Duque did not bother to take action, nor did he have the courtesy of responding to the letter of Commissioner Pabia. Instead, it was Jovita Aragona, the Senior Vice President, who responded in a letter reply dated 8 July 2019, reasoning out that the proposals made by COA auditors will put PhilHealth at risk of violating the stringent requirements of the Data Privacy Act of 2012. But, you know, SPP Aragona's position became untenable with the issuance of Privacy Policy Office Advisory Opinion number 2020-016 by the National Privacy Commission itself, saying that, and I quote, "We must be reminded that the processing of information necessary in order to carry out the functions of public authority in accordance with the constitutionally or statutorily mandated function pertaining to law enforcement or regulatory function subject to restrictions provided by law is one of the instances where the application of the Data Privacy Act of 2012 or DPA and of the DPA's IRR is qualified or limited. This means that when the personal information is needed to be processed by a public authority such as the COA, pursuant to its constitutional mandate, the processing of such personal data is generally allowed by the aforementioned enactments. So just to add to the enlightenment of the sponsor and our distinguished colleagues. Thank you, Mr. President. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to continue, still the Senator Lacson amendments, still under PhilHealth in recommendations. Include a specific provision on the guidelines of all case rates, which shall provide that reimbursements should be based on member patients' actual hospitalization charges and professional fees, or the amount of all case rate, whichever is lower. PhilHealth incurs significant operational losses from the many cases when HCIS and HCPS were reimbursed the full amount per all case rate, even though the actual hospital charges and professional fees incurred by the member patients were lower. With the inclusion of such provision, the policy will not appear to unduly favor HCIS and HCPS to the detriment of the agency and of the government. Still on this point, another paragraph. To maximize the utilization of the machine learning identification, detection, and analysis system, MIDAS, in order to effectively and efficiently validate voluminous claims data and detect overutilization, multiple claims, and other fraudulent activities. I accept, Mr. President.
Any objection?
Mr. President, yes, I have a concern.
Cayetano is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. President and Mr. Senate President sponsor, I have a very serious concern with that amendment because the very nature of the case rate is it averages the expense of an ailment across all types of health facilities. So whether you are a very high-end private hospital, let's say St. Luke's, Makati Med, or a very low-end small public hospital in the province, they study that rate and create an average. And that does away with all the meticulous reporting of Q-tips, cotton buds, syringe, paper cloth, all the medicines. Kasi otherwise, every single ailment would have to be itemized by the medical professional and the hospital and submitted to PhilHealth. And that is why the case rate system is considered the gold standard all over the world because it allows an easier system to deliver the service immediately, and payment should be done immediately. It is not flawless, and there have been criticisms on this, but it far outweighs the disadvantage of one by one itemizing these expenses, including professional fees na na-itemize din if we go back to the per fee system. That is called the fee for service. I can explain this longer to anyone who would like to understand it better, but the minute you introduce the concept that whichever is lower, then you are basically shifting to the fee for service. And that is exactly the opposite of the case rate system, which is institutionalized now in the Universal Health Care Act. So that's the brief explanation, Mr. Sponsor. I feel very strongly about it because yun nga po, it is the gold standard of the world. The developmental partners of DOH and PhilHealth, ito ho yung mga WHO, and even our local health experts from PGH and all across the medical association support po the case rate system. So I strongly urge that we not include that kind of language. But I have language, and when my time comes, my proposal really is to support the case rate and put in the other safeguards so that we minimize the abuses of the case rate. But we cannot go back towards fee for service, Mr. President, with all due respect.
But you do not have any objection to the second paragraph, the utilization of the Midas. Wala, no?
Fortunately, I don't even know what the Midas is, Mr. Chair. So, as long as hindi ho siya bumabalik, as long as hindi ho siya Yes, opo, opo.
Alright, sige. May I have a 1-minute suspension, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President. 1 minute suspension.
Conferring with the author of the proposed amendment, he is willing to listen to the proposal of Senator Pia Cayetano later. So what we can do is that I move to table the proposed amendment from the start of the recommendations from include a specific provision on the guidelines of all case rates all the way to the detriment of the agency and of the government, period. I move to table that particular proposed amendment. We can take it up later after Senator Pia Cayetano.
Any objection? Approved.
And then I accept the Midas paragraph. Maximize utilization of machine learning identification detection analysis system in order to effectively, efficiently validate voluminous claims data and detect overutilization, multiple claims, and other fraudulent activities. I think this is very important. I accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
All right. On page 86, under the recommendations for Anti-Money Laundering Council, after the word accounts, insert, moreover, the mysterious deposit of 9.7 million that was intended for reimbursement of B. Brown Avitum Philippines in PRO2, but ended up into the demand deposit account of Rural Bank of Balanga registered in the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas should also be looked into by the AMLAC or AMLC to determine how and who made the said deposit possible, period. This is also to resolve, excuse me, Mr. President, excuse me po. This is also to resolve how errors in PhilHealth's payment to HCIS become possible despite the presence of its auto credit payment system. I accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
Add the new section under recommendations for the Securities and Exchange Commission. To aid the investigation on the alleged favoritism with respect to the select HCIS and the Balanga Rural Bank case, the SEC must disclose and make public the incorporators, officers of B. Brown Avitum Philippines Incorporated. Likewise, the GIS and statements for the last 5 years must be disclosed. Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
And then add the following recommendations under for various Senate committees. The appropriate Senate committees shall amend RA 10606, particularly the composition of the Board of Directors of PhilHealth under the National Health Insurance Act, mandating the Secretary of the Department of Finance in lieu of the Secretary of Health as the ex officio chairperson of the PhilHealth's Board of Directors. This is in consideration of the fact that PhilHealth is a government financial institution and that the Secretary of Finance is more fitting to further strengthen the agency's fiduciary responsibility to protect the National Health Insurance Fund. This will also preclude possible conflict of interest between the Secretary of Health and healthcare institutions and practitioners. Semicolon. Amendment of the penalties provided also under Republic Act 10606 to increase the amount and the duration of suspension for violations of accredited healthcare providers. Note that the maximum period of suspension under the law is only 3 months. In case of fraudulent claims, irrespective of amount, the penalty of permanent revocation of accreditation must be imposed. Accepted, Mr. President.
In objection? Approved.
That's it. The amendments of our colleagues, Mr. President. May we now ask the Majority Leader to recognize Senator Pia Cayetano for her amendments.
Yes, Mr. President, may I recognize the distinguished lady from Taguig, Pateros, Senator Pia Cayetano.
Mr. President, may I just ask for a minute suspension, and I'll just pull out my notes. I'm ready with the first two, and sorry, let me put on record, as I advised the Senate President earlier today, or I think over the weekend, I had a series of meetings and more research to provide more technical data in our committee report. And since it's very lengthy, I think it's already 12 pages long, I deemed it better to just submit a separate opinion, which I will do. But what I would like to do with the permission of the sponsor is I will pull out, as I have pulled out a few short paragraphs to include as amendments, including the point on the case rate as requested to clarify that issue. And then the rest with the more lengthy explanation, I will just submit as a separate opinion with the permission of the sponsor.
In objection?
I confirm, Mr. President.
Session is suspended.
Yeah, in the meantime, yes.
Thank you. Just give me a minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of Senator Pia Cayetano, she graciously allowed us to continue with the amendments if our distinguished Senate President will agree. Starting with Senator Bong Revilla, also has a manifestation or amendment, as well as Senator Risa Ontiveros. So may we recognize Senator Bong Revilla, Mr. President?
Senator Bong Revilla is recognized.
Yeah, just a short manifestation, Mr. President. I just want to thank the Senate President for accepting and favorably considering my amendments to the committee report of the committee report for the committee of the whole. Thank you, Mr. Senate President, for accepting it.
My pleasure, sir.
Congratulations, Mr. President. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Next in line to propose amendments, Mr. President, with the permission of our Senate President, is Senator Risa Ontiveros, Mr. President.
Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first of just two proposed amendments. The first is on line 3 of page 7 of the committee report, good sponsor. So on page 7 of the committee report, line 3, after the words healthcare services, I propose to add the following sentence. This is reiterated in section 5 of RA 11-22-3 or the UHC law, which states section sorry, Mr. Good sponsor, which states section 5 population coverage. Every Filipino citizen shall automatically be included into the NHIP, hereinafter referred to as the program. So that's the first proposed amendment, a good sponsor. And this amendment just reiterates that the UHC, as the latest law covering PhilHealth, automatically covers all Filipinos. I so move, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Yes, Senate
before I
President
accept,
recognized.
may I know again from the distinguished lady, what page and what line? Because our page 7 on the committee report does not contain that particular.
Mr. President, good sponsor, I'm referring to page 7, line 3 of the committee report, where the phrase healthcare services is found. And then proposing to add the following sentence.
Healthcare services, wait, please.
Yes, Mr. President.
Looking for it because our page 7 in the committee report is not about health services. Hindi page 7 ah.
Forgive me, Mr. President. Let me just check if I have the latest version.
Ito yun, di ba? Ito. Ito lang ang committee report. There's no other committee report. Our received copy of the committee report number 107, page 7, talks
Yes, Mr.
about
President.
diagnostic laboratory and medical examination services, the use of medical equipment facilities. It's about the benefit, the people by way of benefit packages. Eh. Please, you might be talking about another page. What is the heading of your proposal? The heading?
What's the heading? I'm checking the heading, Mr. President. My reference here in the version that I have on page 7, line 3 are the words healthcare services.
Yes, let
yes,
me look
Mr.
for the
President.
healthcare services, please. Just a while.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first sentence of the paragraph I have here, Mr. President, is PhilHealth is commanded to cover all citizens of the Philippines.
Suspend muna.
So you,
Suspend muna. Suspend.
We may have a 1 minute
1
suspension.
minute
Mr. President.
suspension.
yes, Mr. President. Tapos yung page 9.
Mr. President, what the distinguished lady is mentioning is page 6.
Page 6.
Health is commanded to cover all citizens of the Philippines.
Yes, Mr. President, I stand corrected. I apologize and I thank the good sponsor for the correction. My proposed amendment, Mr. President, is that after the words healthcare services,
Healthcare services.
yes, Mr. President,
There's no line eh. No, there is no line. Teka. Yun. Okay, go ahead. After the
thank you,
paragraph.
Mr. President.
Yes.
After the phrase healthcare services, I propose to add the following sentence. This is reiterated in Section 5 of RA 1122(3) or the UHC law, which states, Section 5, population coverage, every Filipino citizen shall be automatically included into the NHIP, hereinafter referred to as the program. I so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
An objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President, good sponsor. And lastly, Mr. President, on page 91, before the word regularly, I propose to insert the words pursuant to Section 18B of RA 1122(3). This would be consistent, Mr. President, with the intent of the UHC law to make PhilHealth shift to other provider payment mechanisms such as diagnosis-related groupings. I so move, Mr. President.
I think you'll have to check on the printing. The committee report is only up to page 88 eh.
Oh my goodness. I apologize again, Mr. President. Yes, I will check the correct pagination now, Mr. President, good sponsor. Yes, Mr. President, the amendment I wish to propose would properly belong on page 82, line 4, Mr. President.
82. Okay.
Line 4.
All right. After big data.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Pitak. Yes, Mr. President. And on that page 82, line 4, before the word regularly, I propose to insert the words pursuant to Section 18B of RA 1122(3). I so move, Mr. President.
We accept, Mr. President.
An objection. Approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, good sponsor.
Thank you.
I believe last to propose some amendments is the our distinguished colleague from Pateros and Taguig. Is she ready, Ma'am Pia?
Yes, I think she's coming up with the 2 amendments and then the rest would be a separate opinion that she will be filing.
Yes.
And, in that case, it does not matter whether we approve the committee report now or later. Even if we approve it later, the separate opinion of the distinguished lady is always and will always be included. Because it's a separate opinion, obviously.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I asked my staff if would you like us to print a copy for you so you can follow if you prefer that I read it and then you can follow along. Would that be better? I'm ready to read it, but I'm happy to also give you a copy.
How long is it? Is it 1 page, 1 amendment? Di naman.
Unfortunately, wait, what is this? One. They are actually 3 pages and they are how many pages? 3? 3. Actually, kasi I tried to pull it out of my committee report, which as I said is very long. So, committee report. My separate opinion, Mr. Chair. So, I have about 2 paragraphs for each point. And the total
There are 2 points.
is
The minority leader
almost 3 pages.
Mr. President, with the permission of the good
3 points,
sponsor,
Mr. Chair.
with the permission of the good sponsor and Senator Cayetano, may I propose, the way I understand it is a separate opinion, which doesn't have to go into the committee report itself. I assume the next step after all the amendments are in is to approve the committee report. And I don't think it is the intention of the good senator from Taguig to have her separate opinion approved together with the committee report, unless we are wrong, Mr. President. So that, as correctly stated by the Senate President, we can just append this to the report later, or make it part of the record without going through the long process of reading it into the record, as we are not going to approve it anyway as part of the committee report, if my understanding is correct. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator
Yes.
Cayetano?
Yeah, yes, Mr. President, I agree with
Yes, I agree.
you. Because
Yes,
it's
and
pretty much,
sorry.
no, it's pretty much like a Supreme Court decision, Mr. President. When a Supreme Court decision is made, it is made unbound. Now, if there is a justice who would like to come up with a separate opinion, whether in favor or dissenting, there's no problem with that. He or she can always incorporate or include a separate opinion into the committee report itself. So perhaps what the minority leader is saying, that it might not even be necessary to pull out 2 or 3 points to include in the amendment, unless it is the pleasure of Senator Cayetano, then I have no objection, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I concur. I concur with both the sponsor, the Senate President, and the Minority Floor Leader. I have no desire to burden my colleagues with my separate opinion. I will just be submitting that separately for those interested in the technical details on case rate system, etc. It will all be there. But because the item on case rate system was brought up, I was not even going to propose it as an amendment. But I think it's timely, because I would like to explain my point on it. I have read it. It's a few paragraphs long. And then the other 2 points, Mr. President, are just additions to what I already amended, just additional paragraph or 2, Mr. President. So I am ready to proceed if unless His Honor would like a copy, and I am checking with my staff if they have already been provided your staff with a copy.
Yeah, it's all right. You can provide our staff with a copy, but I'm ready and willing to listen.
Okay, Mr. President.
Sa case rate yan eh. So, we have a
Senator Pia Cayetano?
we have some kind of a
I think you're on mute.
Sige. I'm ready, Mr. President. Yes, I was on mute because I was conferring with my staff via mobile phone that I am ready. Thank you. Mr. President, with your indulgence, on page 80, it's part of the recommendations, and before the recommendation that starts with increase the involvement, I will insert another paragraph. Increase the involvement of COA, so an insertion before that paragraph.
Yes, okay.
I will proceed, Mr. President. Add a new recommendation to read as follows. Improve the cooperation and coordination between the Commission on Audit, open close parenthesis COA, and PhilHealth to ensure sound and ethical spending of government funds. In particular, with regard to the case rate system, which is the gold standard in many parts of the world, COA auditors and management must have a clear understanding of how the case rate system works. PhilHealth, along with its developmental partners and health finance experts, should conduct training workshops with COA auditors and management. COA and PhilHealth should eventually prepare technical guidelines and promulgate orders and issuances aligned with each other regarding the implementation and auditing of the case rate system. I submit. A very brief explanation, Mr. Chair, Mr. Sponsor, is simply that I understand that the technical people in PhilHealth and DOH have encountered difficulties also with COA in terms of their understanding of how the case rate system works. And I can explain that even further later on the paragraph, on the part on case rate. But the only objective here is that from management down to the auditors, they must understand first how it works and conduct workshops so that they understand it when they start auditing, Mr. President. That's all the point is here.
What does the sponsor say?
The minority leader wishes to point, Mr. President.
The minority leader is recognized.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, if the good sponsor of the amendment will allow. It does not involve a pre-audit on the part of COA, does it? That proposed amendment does not suggest that COA should.
Not at all. No.
Yeah, because
The sole objective really is for them to conduct the workshop so that they understand what is this case rate. It's a different system that, might defy basic logic. So that's all it is.
thank you very much, Mr. President. That's all that I wanted to clarify.
Mr. President,
Senate President.
accepted.
Any objection? Approved.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. President. May I proceed with the next?
Yes, please.
The next item is on page 82, and this is just before the recommendation that starts with the line for PhilHealth to look into strengthening on top of the page. So before that, Mr. President, I
Before
will
that,
add a new recommendation. Yes, a new recommendation, a new paragraph.
all right. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I will proceed. To add a new recommendation that reads as follows. Restructure PhilHealth to ensure that positions are in line with the mandate of PhilHealth and the employees hired are qualified for their positions. It should be pointed out that prior to the implementation of Republic Act 10351 or the Sin Tax Law of 2012, PhilHealth was focused on membership and collection. This is the reason the majority of the personnel in PhilHealth were dedicated to such functions. However, after the Sin Tax Law of 2012, the focus of PhilHealth changed as the national government expanded health insurance coverage by providing the PhilHealth premium subsidy for indigent families and senior citizens from the incremental revenue from the excise tax on all tobacco and alcohol products, thus decreasing the need for PhilHealth to focus on membership and collection. But the bulk of PhilHealth personnel were hired for that purpose and are still holding those positions. Due to the changes in the focus of PhilHealth, the organization must have a set of personnel trained in accreditation and provider payment or reimbursement, also known as strategic purchasing. In addition, PhilHealth should monitor HCIs to ensure quality care is provided and there are no fraudulent transactions submitted. PhilHealth needs the support of these technical personnel to perform these critical functions exclusively mandated in PhilHealth. I submit, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
If there is no other amendment,
Senator Drilon is recognized.
Just a point of clarification. We have approved the amendment. Is the good sponsor of the amendment suggesting that there should be a redundancy program in PhilHealth? Because the way I understood the good sponsor, she was saying that the present complement is still geared towards another system of premium collection. Is the good sponsor of the amendment implying that there should be a redundancy program in order to streamline the personnel force of PhilHealth?
Senator Pia Cayetano.
You are on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute, Senator Pia.
Sorry for that. Thank you so much. I'd like to express my gratitude for pointing that out because he correctly observed that is the direction that I am recommending. I did not go so far as directly saying it because, to be honest, I was cramming my studies over the weekend on this issue, but it does appear that we should consider a redundancy program. So would the minority floor leader like to suggest an amendment to my amendment, directly saying that for PhilHealth to study the possibility of a redundancy program? I am very happy to accept that.
Yes, if the
Subject to style.
subject to style, both in that section and in the section which directs or recommends that the GCG reorganize PhilHealth in accordance with the mandate under the law. So on those two sections, we would propose that amendment, Mr. President, subject to style.
all right. If the distinguished lady accepts that as an amendment,
Accept.
then I accept, subject to style, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
Majority Leader.
Thank you. Actually, Mr. President, and now is the last one on the case rate.
Okay, go ahead, go ahead.
I'm just looking for the proper place. Okay, Mr. President, still on page 82. After the recommendation that reads for PhilHealth to look into strengthening its manpower,
Hmm.
an insertion of another recommendation there, Mr. President.
Hmm. Go ahead.
I will proceed with your permission. Properly implement the case rate system as intended under the UHC Act and continuously update case rate data to improve accuracy. The case rate system is one of the global best practices introduced in the Philippines even before the passage of the UHC Act. It is a fundamental feature of the UHC Act. The objective of the case rate system is to simplify and make it efficient to bill treatments. It is a payment scheme where a fixed amount is paid to healthcare institutions, open parenthesis, HCIs, close parenthesis, per instance of treatment of a specific illness or case. The amount to be paid per case is computed from the average cost of treatment in public and private HCIs, which includes professional fees, medical tools, bed fees, and medicines. Being an average, there will be instances when the payment is insufficient to cover treatment, as it is when a case is more complex, more tests or procedures are done, and if it is in a private hospital. But there will also be times when the payment exceeds the cost of treatment, more likely to be the case in public hospitals. Given the foregoing, the payment to the HCIs are expected to balance out. Next paragraph. The case rate system far outweighs the disadvantages of using a fee-for-service system, which is not only a tedious process requiring the submission of every expense that forms part of the procedure, but has also been shown to be more prone to abuse by way of overcharging what was actually used and over-prescribing procedures or medications. Next paragraph. However, we must take note that the case rate system currently utilized by PhilHealth is merely in its initial stages. The next step for PhilHealth is to introduce the diagnosis-related grouping, or DRGs, in the current case rate system as provided for under the UHC Act. DRG classify cases according to the following variables: principal and secondary diagnosis, patient age and sex, the presence of comorbidities and complications, and the procedures performed. DRGs will ensure that benefits given to patients are tailor-fit, as the benefit rates will be modified based on a database of reimbursement rates that will provide average differential cost per treatment. I submit. Mr. President, brief explanation. The case rate system is a complex case, and we also have to graduate into not just always updating the case rate, but graduating into this DRG. Yung DRG will provide different kinds of classification within the same kind of ailment. So kung bata ka, mas maliit yung cost kasi the chances of you having complications will be much less, and so on and so forth. Ito po yung sinasabi ko na medyo mahaba yung explanation ko. That's why it's in my own separate opinion. However, because of the questions raised, I shortened it and I am submitting it to the main committee report with the permission, of course, of the sponsor. Thank you.
May I just say something,
Yes.
distinguished sponsor? The reason, alam nyo, pinanggagaling ko na aking proposed amendment, COA itself, because according to COA, yung upcasing ng all case rates, yun ang source ng corruption.
Mr. President, I'm happy to respond. May I?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. As I mentioned, Mr. President, in the other recommendation that was already approved, that is precisely why we are suggesting that there would be these workshops and training programs with COA auditors and management, because without a clear understanding of how case rates works, madali hong sabihin na it's a source of abuse, because it can be abused like any system. Again, the example I gave you is if you look at, let's say, pneumonia, obviously St. Luke's, Makati Med, or whatever private hospital will always charge for pneumonia much more expensive than a public hospital, right? And yet the case rate is the same, regardless kung public or private. So may savings talaga si public hospital dyan. Now, if we will now go the way of COA and simply say, ay mag-fee-for-service kayo kasi mas mura kayo pag fee-for-service dyan, then we will now open that Pandora's box wherein the disadvantage, we are told, far outweigh the disadvantages of the case rate because dito naman, they can put in any expense that they want. And the tendency in the fee-for-service, Mr. President, is that they overprescribe because they can charge it eh. So dyan ho yung parang sa US, yan ho yung US system, if I may ask you to visualize whatever you know of the US system wherein ang taas-taas ng healthcare cost, it's because they keep charging it to the insurance provider. Ganyan ho ang mangyayari sa fee-for-service. The doctors will feel the need to keep ordering all these kinds of tests dahil may magbabayad, and that is PhilHealth. And even the abuses would happen that way. Kahit hindi kailangan yung procedure na yon or yung test na yon, papagawa nila. So dun ho yung disadvantage ng fee-for-service. And that is why all the health experts have weighed in on this and they recommend the case rate. In any case, all we are saying is that let's allow COA to be trained properly. And then we can hear from them, no, kung ano pa yung ibang recommendations nila, Mr. President. I submit.
Permission of Senator Cayetano. Senator Drilon is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. After listening to Senator Cayetano, I would really endorse her proposal that we stay with the case rate system, principally because we all know that to give that discretion breeds corruption. That is why a case rate is more attractive from where I sit, because then at standard, it's a standard fee, a standard rate that is paid, and you know, at the end of the day, I think the corruption is minimized with the case rate as against a pay for services, which is subject to so much discretion. The PhilHealth then will be allowed and will be given the authority to allow or disallow a particular claim. And you know what happens in those instances. I would suggest that, imperfect as it is, let us the COA should propose measures to tighten the rules so that corruption is minimized. But I would agree with a good sponsor that to have to go back to the pay as for service system would give so much discretion to PhilHealth that it opens us to more corruption. So I would endorse the proposal of the good sponsor from the gig. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. President, hearing from Senator Cayetano and the Minority Leader, and I would like to confer with the presiding officer. The Lakers are calling a timeout, Mr. President.
Session is suspended for 1 minute.
Ito yung nami-miss ko, yung makapag-focus sa floor, di ba?
Actually, I miss that too. Wala tayong mga huddle. We used to huddle all the time.
Di ba? Mas madali doon.
This is what you call transparency to its fullest meaning.
Oo nga. And we have to be careful kasi baka yung huddle natin, it's ano, no, it's shown on the Senate floor, no? So,
Yes,
Di ba, one time we
it's
were-
not
we were
exactly a
chatting.
huddle.
Mr. President, we completely understand the point or where the distinguished lady is coming from. We understand it. In fact, as a matter of fact, we concur. But there is a slight amendment that is contained in the original amendment regarding the issue of case rate. So, the amendment is, the parliamentary status is that the proposal of Senator Pia Cayetano is on the floor as a proposed amendment to the committee report. During the recess, the presiding officer wanted to infuse a line or two so that the tabled amendment earlier would no longer be resurrected. So if we can ask Senator Cayetano to listen to your proposed amendment, I will adopt it. So that if she adopts it, then we can already approve the particular amendment point. May we hear your proposal?
Senator Cayetano, kindly read into the record.
Does His Honor have a copy of my? Will you insert in one of the paragraphs that I proposed, Mr. Presiding Officer?
In page 82.
Yes.
Yes, please proceed.
And then she read it into the records already.
Do you have a copy?
Can you read it again, Senator Cayetano?
Yes. Would you like a copy? It's quite lengthy. Can I ask somebody to give you a copy? I think the Senate President staff has a
Yes,
copy.
we'll give it to Senator Lacson now.
Asan yung substantial? Improve accuracy. Ganun lang. Mr. President, I cannot see any major contradiction on the amendment as introduced by Senator Cayetano and my proposed amendment. So maybe we can reconcile or marry the two amendments if it is acceptable to Senator Cayetano. Because my amendment reads that reimbursement should be based on member patients' actual hospitalization charges and professional fees or the amount of all case rate, whichever is lower. So I cannot see how discretion will come into the picture because there's this caveat, there's this qualifier, whichever is lower.
Mr. President, may I respond?
Senator Cayetano.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. President, I understand where the presiding officer, the good gentleman from Cavite, is coming from. And this is also why I go back to the recommendation, like in the case of COA, because it makes total sense what His Honor is saying, no, whichever is lower. However, that goes against the very nature of how the case rate system works. Because the way the case rate system works, it does away with the tedious process of itemizing every expense. It will just be submitted that item number 1, which is case rate 001, has happened, therefore approved, no? Pagka kung meron tayong or, whichever is lower, then you will now require that PhilHealth, who is already so inefficient and undermanned with people who are qualified to do this job, will now be comparing the case rate and every single itemized item that is being presented to them. That is the fee for service. So technically, the simple amendment of the good gentleman, which as I said, in principle makes sense, actually opens the door for the fee for service. Nagiging fee for service na po siya by giving that or. By providing for that or, you're then saying, pwede ka naman mag-fee for service. yes, nandun ho yung captured po yung concern ng ating colleague from Cavite na lower. But yung efficiency ngayon ng PhilHealth to itemize every single one will really be wreak havoc, I believe, on the system of PhilHealth. That's my understanding,
Yes,
Mr.
boss.
President.
Senator Cayetano, I remember Senator Amy Marcos brought this up during the Committee of the Whole hearing. And she mentioned about, ordinary cough and colds, nagiging pneumonia. So yung upcasing, this is the culprit, as mentioned by COA, in corruption that is very dominant sa operation ng PhilHealth. So, in any case, Mr. President, I will not insist on my amendment if there's a conflict with the proposed amendment of Senator Cayetano. I want your committee report adopted right now, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank the gentleman for his concerns kasi they are very valid concerns. But again, I will also repeat, that's why part of my recommendations are that number one, the case rates are regularly updated so that it captures what are the ailments and concerns of the time. And number two din, ang malaking culprit din kasi dun sa situation na sinasabi niyang upcasing is because currently we do not have outpatient treatment. And that is also part of my recommendations, which is already in the separate opinion because I did not want to burden the chair and the committee with them. But that is such an important component because imagine, kung mabibigyan ng outpatient ng tablets or ng medicine, then hindi na siya tatanggapin sa ospital. Ang nangyayari, and I've mentioned this during the debates in the Committee of the Whole, some doctors without malice, without intention to defraud, would agree to upcasing kasi walang pambayad ng gamot yung bata o yung matanda. So kesa wala silang gamot whatsoever, o sige, i-upcase na lang natin yan, pneumonia na lang yan. Pero sa totoo lang, with an outpatient treatment, it would be solved. Now, the universal healthcare provides for outpatient treatment, and I will present you, my dear colleagues, with our next challenge. We have to ensure that the budget for 2021 will now include a budget for outpatient because that will address the upcasing or one of the instances of upcasing.
Right. With the manifestation of Senator Lacson or the presiding officer, Mr. President, I accept the amendment of Senator Cayetano.
An objection? Approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, the gentleman from Cavite. Thank you.
Majority Leader,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, there being no more amendments being proposed, we move to close the period of amendments. I so move, Mr. President.
There is a motion to close the period of amendments and objection. Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, we move to approve on second reading Committee Report number 107. I so move, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Mr. President,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
I think
move.
yes, we ask the
Yeah.
My
majority leader.
apologies. Move to adopt, Mr. President.
Yeah, that is a better motion.
Yeah, move to adopt.
There is a motion to adopt Committee Report number 107. Any objection? Hearing none, we congratulate the Senate President. Approved.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. President. We'd like to
Session
congratulate.
is suspended for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, my esteemed colleagues. Thank you very much.
Tinatapos
Thank you. Congrats, Mr. President.
Thank you.